Hi guys, my name is Chris. Have you ever wondered how selling of your HDB timeline is going to be like? In this video, I have a quick overview to understand a little bit on selling a HDB timeline is going to be. I'm drawing a timeline that is for selling of HDB. We start off with the whole process of OTP. It just means that the buyer and the seller have established a price to transact the property, and this is the price that they are both agree on. In exchange for that option to purchase given by the seller, the buyer have to transfer 1,000 deposit from the buyer to the seller. Given the OTP timeline, there is 21 days for the buyers to exercise the OTP. So in these 21 days for the buyer itself, they will need to firstly request for valuation. The very next day upon the receiver of the OTP, they will have to submit the valuations request on the HDB website. Once the valuation is out from the HDB, the buyer will then decide what are the financing options for their purchase. Thereafter, they will exercise the OTP. So once the buyer have exercised the OTP, the buyer will have transfer $4,000. There are three criteria to exercise this option to purchase. Number one is to pay the seller the remaining $4,000. Both these sum add up together will be a deposit for the transaction itself. Secondly is to sign on the acceptance in the options to purchase. And also, lastly, the third condition is to transfer the OTP contract to the seller. After exercising the OTP, the next step is to submit the case. So in the options to purchase itself, it will date that what is the number of calendar days both parties have to submit the case. And important to note is that the buyer and the seller both have to time their submission within a 7 days time frame. So let's take an example of it is a 14 days for submission. So after you submit the case to HDB, we will need to pay HDB $120 for the submission. After submitting the case to HDB, HDB will need to process it backend. Once they are finished process the case, the next milestone is acceptance. So for HDB cases, it varies. It depends on how long it takes for HDB to process the whole application. Let's just say that it takes about 4 weeks plus minus. So after the acceptance, it just means that HDB will also send an SMS to all the involved party, the buyers, the seller, buyer agent, seller agent, on the completion date. So usually the acceptance to completions, it is a standard 8 weeks difference. Okay, what it means for during the completion is that for buyers and sellers, they will both need to go down to the HDB hub to go and sign off the documents, or rather to sign off the sales and purchase agreements. And legally, from this day onwards, the buyer is the owner, whereas on this end, legally, the seller is still the owner. Okay, so this is a very basic and straightforward timeline for selling of the HDB. So, but prior to this, you will definitely need to do a process called intent to sell. So this intent to sell have to do 7 days prior to before issuing of the OTP. There's also a viewing period. A viewing period depends on days, weeks, or months. It depends on the popularity of the unit. So during this viewing period, what we can do is that we can best present or bring out the house so that a buyer will be able to appreciate the unit as much as you do. And also this will minimize the downtime, or rather the viewing period, for us to transact this property. Before issuing an OTP, we can determine what is the submission day that we require. For instance, maybe when you are selling your property, you are also looking to buy the next property, you probably will want to request for something like a 60 days submission. So this allows you to have ample time for you to go and kickstart your own process to find your own property. As what I mentioned previously, after the completion, you are no longer the legal owner, which means to say you might not be able to stay inside this unit. So for instance, if you are in the midst of transiting to the next property, you may want to request for an extension stay period. And this extension stay period is maximum up to 3 months. So at the end of this extension stay, you have to hand over the key to the buyer, and the buyer will be the legal owner. I hope that this video have allowed you to have a better understanding of the whole timeline. This is just a very basic of the whole timeline. I think every sellers, or rather every property owner, have their own unique timeline. So it's really, really important to speak to a property consultant to let them understand and cater to your needs. If you are looking at this video, I believe that you are actually in the midst of selling and also transacting another property. For example, like doing a sell and buy situation. I think it's really important for you to reach out to a property consultant to let them understand your situation and see how they are able to assist you. My name is Chris. My contact number is 9009-2050. If you like what is being presented to you and would like to find out more from me, feel free to reach out to me. Let's have a session together.